Our goal today is to take a single compound shape, my example, it's just a balloon, and use two arrays of float variables so I can make a whole bunch of these compound shapes randomly spaced on the screen. We have a lot of experience substituting in single float or integer variables for the x and y locations of compound shapes using algebraic expressions. So I'm going to do this in two steps. My first step is just to do that same process that I'm used to doing, subbing in x and y and algebraic expressions for the various shape functions in my compound shape. And then from there, I'm going to turn it into an array. So to start out with, I'm going to say float x and float y. I'm using float instead of int because eventually, since I'll be using the random function, and the random function gives you a float variable, I want this to be float just to start out with to be easy. I made my first shape located at 250 on the x-axis, 250 on the y-axis. It doesn't matter where I started. The thing that matters is that this line, for example, the x values are exactly the same, and the triangle, the first x value is the same, but the second is just a teeny bit to the left, and the third is a teeny bit to the right. I'm trying to preserve the relationships between these numbers. Please do not just add plus x to these variables. You need one of the shapes just to contain x and y without an algebraic expression so that x and y is located somewhere on your shape. All right, so since I said again, the initial x and y for that first shape is 250, 250, and those are nice numbers, I'm going to give my x and y an initial value, each of them, of 250. Then from there, I can start making my substitutions, and I'll start with x. So I can just say x here for my ellipse, 1x variable in these parameters, among these parameters, because this, of course, is the width. Then in the triangle, there are 3, so that first one can be x. But since the second one had that, when I made it initially, had a value of 245, I know that I want this x value to be 5 pixels to the left of my original x, and that this one is going to be 5 pixels to the right, so x plus 5. Down here for the line, I've got another just plain old x and a third plain old x for both of those, as they were both 250. Now I'm ready to do y substitutions. I'll sub in y for 250 here. And then if I start out with 285, that's y plus 35. And then y plus 40. And another y plus 40 here. Oops, 40. And then finally, y plus 40. And y plus 140 for the bottom of the string. So if I play it now, it should look exactly the same. The next step is going to be to turn these single x and y variables into two different arrays of variables. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put the square brackets next to float to say not one x variable, but an array of x variables. And all of a sudden I've gotten that type mismatch. Int does not match with float and those square brackets, meaning this is an array, so 250 isn't acceptable initialization. So I'm going to use a for loop in setup to initialize all the different variables in my array, my x array of float variables. So I just need to give it a size now. So let's say 50. I'm going to make 50 balloons. And then I'm going to do the same thing with y. Not one y variable, but 50. Here in setup, I want to initialize, oops, I forgot a semicolon there. All 50, so I'm going to say for int I equals 0, I is less than 50, I plus plus. And then I'll start with x, and so I'm going to use I, so the first time through it'll initialize the first I variable, I0, then I1, I2, so it'll initialize all of them up to I49. So I'm going to use random, and I'm going to give the lowest x value that I want and the highest x value I want. Since that initial value of x is 50, and that's the center of the balloon, I might say 25 to make sure all the balloons are completely on screen, but that's up to you. And so if I do that, maybe I'll say 475 is the max value. going to initialize all values of y with a random number as well. So I might say 35 is the top of the balloon and the bottom of the balloon. Let's say 360. So now, I'll close my curly bracket. Now all of a sudden I've got a bunch of errors here because there's no such thing as x and y anymore, only x0, x1, x2, x3, all the way up to x49, and of course the same with y. So I need to call these shape functions now inside a for loop and adjust all of the integers so that they are integers from that array. So for int I equals 0, I is less than 50, I plus plus. Close that curly bracket, Command T to auto format, and then I'm going to go through and add those square brackets and the letter I. So each time through the loop, it will it will place a different shape function using each one of those 50 x variables and 50 y variables that we made. Let's see, I hope I get them all. Looks like I probably did. And then now you have 50 balloons. Oh, interesting. So an unintended consequence of the way I arranged these for loops is that I included the stroke inside the for loop to modify this line function, but I left the no stroke outside of the for loop. So the second time through, the stroke applied to that ellipse. Somewhere in here, the first ellipse made, which may be buried, oh, I think I see it there, is the ellipse without the stroke function. So we know that is the ellipse made with x0 and y0. So to fix that, I'll just move that no stroke back in here. Although maybe with them overlapping, it might be nice to have them be use that the stroke function to help define the balloons. Or perhaps it might be interesting to use the I variable then to adjust the color a little bit. So maybe instead of saying 255 here, I could say I, and let's see, I'm going up to 50, so maybe I could say I times 5. Maybe I want them all to be like between sort of blue and purple. Get some balloons of different colors. That